Tollefsrud. Thank you, Nick. Thank you all. I mean, like I said, I'm inspired by every single one of you. I just think it's so exciting to be in this crowd. So, like he was saying, I'm a therapist, so I'm a licensed independent mental health clinician. I work at Kindred Psychology. So our group that we work with predominantly are LGBTQIA+ and queer communities. And so I see a lot of sexual and gender minority clients, youth, all the way up to adults. And so in thinking about this today, I actually really struggled to think of this because I wanted to, and I think it's nice to follow you to start. I'm going to pull us back a bit and start talking about the perceived barriers to hope, right? Because we're talking about the importance of hope, and that's so important. And I wanted to first take a step back because I have a lot of clients who right now with legislation and the world right now as it is, really struggling to find hope. And so I wanted to name, like, what are those barriers so we can start working with them instead of saying, have hope, let's talk to context matters, right? So the first thing I hear is it's toxic positivity language, right? Like, we can't just situate ourselves in this state of only seeing the positive, like Candide, you know, that firing the fire around you and say, oh, let's grab a marshmallow, this is great. No, it's on fire. Like, let's honor, it's on fire. And then, yes, what can we do to start putting out the fires? The second one I think of and I hear is there's a sense of if you give up, like you're giving up if you're going into this sense of hope or positivity, that you're condoning the suffering, that somehow if you're leaning into hope, then somehow you're saying like, oh, it's okay, that like, if you're hopeful, it's like you're just allowing suffering to exist. And then the third one I hear way more than I would like is that hope is privilege. Like there is privilege to seeing hope, right? Like hope is for those people where good outcomes are more regularly available. And when I was thinking about that one, is anyone familiar with the marshmallow test? There's a marshmallow test. Okay, so there was a marshmallow test that was done by Stanford, thank you to my notes, Walter Mischel. 1967, they reached out to a group of preschoolers, 4.5 years old, and highly recommend looking up this video because it is adorable. But you've got 4.5-year-olds and they're given a marshmallow. And the whole idea is the researcher, Dr. Mischel, says, okay, if you don't eat that marshmallow, I come back in a certain amount of time that they've designated as researchers, I'll give you a second marshmallow. And so then they study them over 30-some years, 3 decades of their life to kind of see this longitudinal, if you were waiting, if you had prolonged gratification, how does that impact your future? And in 1967, right, let's all honor that they might have had some blinders on. Needless to say, the kids that you could see them, it is a really cute video, like you can see them like, and then they eat it. And they did the longitudinal study, and this was everywhere, right? Like Reader's Digest, it was if you prolong gratification, you have a better outcome in your life, right? So the idea is like if you wait, great, you will have better financial stability, you'll have better mental health, you'll have all of these other things. Well, Dr. Mischel then, 40 years later, went back and was part of the study, and he actually debunked his own work with a team of scientists, which I appreciate that he was in on it, right? And so in 2018, and this literature is just now starting to cycle out, they redid the study. So the first study was done with like 138 sample kids, very small sample size comparatively. This next one they did 900. So they have a much larger sample size. And they controlled for things like income, for family life, for health and wellness, for their neurocognitive ability. And so then the amount of time, which was across the board for every child, has now shifted based on their environmental factors and their neurobiological factors, and we understandably can see that it's vastly different, right? So there is still an element that once controlled for the amount of time, so your tool is there, your understanding of your makeup is there, they have shown that the biggest component that put a barrier to that was whether or not the kiddos believed that the experimenter would bring back that marshmallow. Whether or not they trusted that that marshmallow would come back. Whether or not, and so why am I bringing this and why do I think about this? That privilege of waiting, right? That privilege of hopefulness. That privilege of assuming that the good will come. And so that's what I really feel like I do a lot in my work, is to really instill in them the sense that that's not privilege, that's that's a right. That positive outcomes is a framework that you can invite in, and with the right tools you can really create a different outcome for yourself, and it is not for a certain group of people, it's for everybody. As long as we take into context who you are, where you're coming from, and make sure that we adapt and adopt for you. So then I think about, okay, so what is hope? Because hope is important for everybody, right? It is not a right. It is not privileged. It is for everybody. So in looking at this, if you know me, I love untranslatable words. So like Greek is one of my favorites, just the untranslatable words into English. And so I was looking at hope, modern English, old Germanic language, very traditional. But I also found that the Greek word for hope is formulated by Elpis, which is part of the Greek myth and the goddess, lower goddesses as they talk about them, but of the story with Pandora's box. So, right, that's kind of a common theme that we hear, like opening Pandora's box. Pandora's box is open and all of the evils of the world flow out. But the reason Elpis is the one that personifies hope is that she was the one remaining in the box, indicating that in the midst of suffering, there will always be hope. And that's kind of the theme I wanted to just instill in this, is that hope isn't necessarily seeing just the positive. It's also holding space for that difficulty and the tug of hopelessness. Why is that so enticing for my clients, and why is that so enticing for people? Because hope is vulnerable. And understanding that is a very real component to this too. It's scary to ask and believe that that experimenter is going to bring back something they promised. It's scary to believe in something bigger than yourself. And so incremental understanding that that is something that is possible for you with the tools provided. Because hope, and when I was looking at this, they broke it down. I think this is some of the information that you shared. So hope it's kind of an algorithm. Hope equals the positive expectation, or the expectation that a positive outcome may come, and then your belief in yourself. So those two components can really empower that sense of hopefulness. And we can all honor that sometimes that's hard, right? Like, it is hard to both believe that there is a positive outcome, and it's also hard to sometimes believe that we have the agency to do that. So when we really whittle that down and start tacking on, and start working and empowering those two components, people can really start to feel the power of hope. So the other definition I personally love, and I'm borrowing this from Krista Tippett. If anyone knows On Being, highly recommend her work as a podcast. She actually just started a hope segment on that, so I'm borrowing this directly from her. But she talks about hope as a muscle, which I absolutely love, right? Because hope isn't this elusive thing that you just hopefully grab onto. Sometimes I believe people, and I see people say they hope for hope, right? They're wanting to catch it that moment that they get it. But it's a muscle. You work at it, right? It's that conscious effort, strengthening and honing. Hope is like joy, like love, like gratitude, like compassion, right? They're vulnerable. They're sometimes in our society they're weakened and they atrophy because, the world's scary right now, And so with young people who may not see a lot of this, it makes sense that that muscle feels weaker right now. So giving them moments like you're doing to strengthen them, right? To give them space to make them cool again, And so in that, I also was thinking about the Cherokee. The Cherokee Nation has a story about the two wolves. And the two wolves initially, there's this grandfather who's talking to his grandson. And there's the one, and the grandfather talks to his grandson and he says, I have two wolves inside of me. They're fighting, they're battling. And there's the one wolf that is brought about by suffering and sorrow and devastation. And the other wolf is joy and happiness and love and compassion. And so the grandson turns to the grandfather and says, well, which one wins? And the grandfather says, the one that I feed. And so I tell my clients that all the time. Like it's honoring that we have them, like Pandora's box, we have both inside us all the time. And it's not about shying away from the darkness, because that's something like we're talking about suicidality. The one indicator for decreasing suicidality is to talk about it. Bring it to the surface. Take the sting of shame away from it. So if hopelessness is kind of starting to get a little bit of a hold on you, talk about it, right? Hopelessness is not an end-all precursor for hopelessness forever. It's just saying, like, hope is hard right now. That muscle's a little weak, and that's okay. So I think we all know why hope is important. Like, it strengthens the prefrontal, it calls upon the prefrontal cortex. It brings about dopamine, serotonin, all that feel good, chemicals in the brain. It also empowers resiliency. And so that's one thing I do a lot of work with my clients in my community. And so in that, I wanted to kind of bring about a thought experiment. And so we'll see how this works. So think about kind of what the theme is as I'm talking about this, the balancing of both the dark and the light, and thinking about those two wolves of suffering and joy. And bring a moment to mind that, like, bring something to mind that calls to question your hope. Something in the world right now, just something light, you don't have to dive too deep, but bring to mind something that just it just tugs at hope, just a little bit. Just challenges your sense of hope, just really pokes at it. And once you have that, kind of flip it, invert it. Why is that thing important to you? That thing is only being threatened because you care about it. So as you think about why is this thing important, and we're inverting it and we're teasing out the central component of it, what's one thing you can do, one tiny thing, that instills something for that to feel better, just a little bit. Someone to talk to, a song to write, a piece of art to make, just one thing. Once you have that, I almost want to have us all share together, like small groups. I'm a facilitator. But the next thing I'll say, and the last thing I'll wrap up, is that in my work, so much of what I do is community, especially working with communities. Like I work within. I started my work in therapy because I started as a teaching artist within the disability community, the all ability community, and so community is central. Once hopelessness just takes you out of community, hopelessness makes you just kind of puts a barrier around you. Hope, joy, that reaching out to somebody else to say, I'm not alone in this, that is central. So if you think about that one thing, think about who you want to share that with. That one thing that makes the world better. Maybe it's someone here. Maybe it's texting someone you haven't texted in a while. Maybe it's sharing it to someone when you get home.
The light and the darkness that we share in our experience, like Edgar Allan Poe was a master of that, because he would write some really dark shit, but it was a love story. And so you realize that those things is part of the human experience, and it's what makes life like the beautiful part of it. But Edgar Allan Poe was a master at helping people understand that your darkness and your love can coexist.
Yeah. And how beautiful to turn it into like that poetry, that story that we can all dive into.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we hide ourselves when we try to kind of suppress our dark side. Really, it's kind of the exciting part about who we are.
Absolutely. Like, I talk about anger a lot with my clients. Anger is such a beautifully cultivating emotion. Like, obviously, it's how you use it.
For sure.
But what an amazing way to activate yourself towards something that you're obviously caring about.
I think hope is when we are able to learn from people. And I just have to share something with you that maybe you can spread as well. My son is a paramedic in Denver and has been there for a long time. And it was his birthday yesterday, so he was calling my daughter back. We were chatting, and he just wanted to give us a word of wisdom. He said, okay, do you guys wear those little clips on your hair like you have? And he said, if you're in an accident, the airbag will slam your head back and can cause a tremendous amount of well, I mean, who knew? Who thinks
Right.
about these things? But he said it can really, really damage your head if you have one of those. So just so you know. I just thought,
Take it off.
Thank you. Yeah. On a spot I can put it. Thank you. Thank you to your son.
I said, I will spread that information. I never thought about that before, so thank you.
Thank you.
It's interesting because I had a transplant that I'm working with, the first transplant that I'm working with. And when you remove the legs, you just see another person trying to carve out space and stuff.
Right. Thank you for working with them.
It's been very interesting because again, when you look beyond the layers, it's just another person just trying to find a sense of emotion.
Yeah, and building that sense of identity. And so much of it is, again, that sting of shame. You talk about shame work a lot. And also, just as a side note, we have a lot of people transfer their clients to us once they start coming on as trans. And it's really damaging to the relationship because you have built a rapport, you know? And so if you are person-centered or if you see them just as a person, the work doesn't change,
Right.
you know?
You offer groups.
Yeah, yep.
Very.
Yep, we have support groups for adults, for teens, and then for like caregivers and partners.
They don't know that they're there yet, but when they get there, they're like, you should go.
Yeah, yes.
For sure.
We do trainings too, if anyone in your group is interested.
Already.
Thank you.
Thank you.